Yeah. Did you see the picture, Pablo?
And Bryan, your life.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and I hope you have enjoyed all of the incredible videos and messages from all of our special guests. I'd like to welcome you, and we're going to start first with a prayer and welcome from Casey Camp. So if you could, Casey, the floor is yours. And yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm learning your techie ways, guys. I even know how to unmute and mute. It's a major thing in my life. Not in real life, I don't know how to do that, but on this machine, I know. Atia, it's good to be among you. I want to say thank you first and foremost to all of us who have joined together on this evening. With your permission, I'd like to say a few words. And if it's not comfortable for you, you know how to mute me. Just do that and talk to the in the best way that you know how, with a great mystery or not, as you choose. So it's wonderful to be with you this evening. Satya Yijiji Witake Banka Abadi Mashte Panka, Oklahoma. My name is Judy. I'm a Ponca woman from Oklahoma. I'm going to talk to Wakanda, the great mystery, on our behalf. Wakanda Khube, Maja Khube, Wiblaha Ehe, Wiblaha Ni, Wiblaha Bahadenge, Shingajinga, Dachte, Khida, Wiblaha Mi, Miamba, Mikae. Thank you, Great Spirit, for the water, for the winds, Father, Son, Mother Earth, our ancestors, our children, for the four legs, the fins, the wings, and all those in between. We say thank you because on this evening, on this day, in this life, we're joined together at this particular point to share with one another a way forward, a way to honor the ancestors who made it possible for all of us to be here. We ask a special blessing tonight on those in mourning, on those sickly, those in the hospitals, those that are our caretakers, all of those in the ways of the sacredness that take care of others in whatever form they are at this time. Give them strength and well-being. Teach us and help us and bring our minds together with our spirits so that we could make a way just as our ancestors did. If there's someone, some way, some being that we haven't honored yet, please take that from the center of our spirit and offer it into the universe. For all of us in all directions, bring us together as one. Shah, Wiblaha.
Thank you, Casey, so much.
Mm.
And I think it's Wiblaho, right? I said that correct.
Yes, you did, young man.
All right. And welcome again, everyone. I want to allow everyone to introduce themselves, and we'll stop or we'll start from the south. Um, in Montevideo. I'm assuming you're in Montevideo, but I'm not sure. Pablo Albarenga, if you could share with us a little bit about who you are, and let's just assume folks they didn't get to see the incredible short video and your videos and work. So if you could share a little bit about that.
Well, thank you to all of you for being here. It's an honor to be here to discuss and to share the space and this moment together. My name is Pablo Albarenga. I'm a photographer and a documentary photographer and visual storyteller. And my work focuses on human rights in Latin America. I work mostly with traditional communities fighting extractivism, mainly in the Amazon rainforest, but also in those places where the Amazon has been completely destroyed and now there are soybean fields or lands full of cattle. I think that's an introduction.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and we'll get more into your story after the introduction. So thanks again. And Liana Lopez, for y'all that don't know, is my partner in crime, and we've been together for 16 years, and vast majority of the work that I've done, we've actually done together. So this is her first time on a panel too, so I'm really excited, to be able to share some of the thoughts and experiences that she's had. But if you could also introduce yourself, your point of view, and how you would describe your contribution, your work, and your role.
So I'm a multi-platform journalist, a media maker. Basically, I'm based in the Gulf South, but also we've been doing work internationally on an international level. But I am based in Houston, Texas, and a lot of my work is based along the Gulf South, helping people tell their own stories. We'll leave it at that.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. And of course, Casey Camp, who opened up for us in a beautiful way. If you could share a little bit about yourself, your community, and anything else you'd like folks to know before we get started.
Good evening again. I think that the majority of you saw where I live, and that's in north central Oklahoma. Our people, the Ponca, are originally from Nebraska, South Dakota area, forcibly removed into this territory by the colonists where we live. It's kind of tricky. We're happy, we enjoy being alive, and yet we suffer as far as the extractive industry's presence in our life and what it has done to our culture and the earth, air, and water where we live right now. And I think that story is the one that links us all together on this red quadrant of Mother Earth, from the tip of the Arctic Circle down to the bottom of Chile. And as different as our localities are, our stories are remarkably the same from the onset of the colonist into this time of mechanization and fossil fuel extractions and mining and all of that stuff. So I'm a mama, I'm a grandma, a great grandma. These newlyweds here, just 16 years. My husband and I are going to hit 52 years.
Whoa!
This year. And we're kind of growing up, finally. After we hit 50 years, we're getting the hang of this. But we do enjoy our life together and do our best to stay healthy at this time of this pandemic, this time of our teachings and our learning and the winter of our storytelling. It's good to be with you all.
so much. And I want to go now to the West Coast, a little further up north. Shannon's an incredible ally and supporter and force in her own right, and has been helping advocate for the rights of nature through movement rights. But Shannon, if you could please share with us a little bit about yourself and how you would like folks to receive you as we begin our conversation today.
Thanks, Bryan. My name is Shannon Biggs, and I'm a co-founder of a largely Indigenous-led organization called Movement Rights. We work to advocate for Indigenous rights and the rights of Mother Earth, and in particularly at the intersection of those two things, which I know we'll be talking a little bit about. And so, yeah, I think that's it for now. Thanks, Bryan.
Awesome.
And just to say, and Casey is on our board and is also one of part of our leadership for Movement Rights as well. So we're very honored to have her in that role as well. Thanks.
That's awesome. And for those that don't know, you may have heard Movement Rights during the festival because they are the beneficiary of all of the support that will be collected through the course of the festival. So we want to thank Eaton for doing that. We've done some incredible work with Movement Rights myself, and I know many others who appreciate all that they do. So to get us started, I want to start kind of from the beginning, and it's a personal interest to me because I am a law school dropout, but I think part of it was because of the problems I had as I was studying law. And I know we have some really incredible experts here on the rights of nature, and we've been seeing a lot of conversations about, the rule of law and law and order, and how these systems have been used to take our land and also to exact violence and justify that violence on all of us. So if you could, Shannon, first give us a little context about the way the legal system was introduced into this continent, and how it's been used to do all of those things at the behest of Europe, Spain, the church, etc.
Thanks, Bryan. Yeah, I think just like with many myths about this country, that Native Americans certainly don't need to be told, but for those of us who are not indigenous to this continent, from Thanksgiving to Columbus Day, this idea of discovering people who were here 15,000 years before Columbus accidentally made his way here, that the Western empires were of Spain, Europe, all the European colonies. They're very small countries with large aspirations, and this idea that that they would go out and conquer other places, other countries, and strip them of their wealth and enslave their people. That has been the way that these countries grew rich and powerful. And the system of law that, the myth that we're told about this country is that first of all, this country was empty of people when the white settlers arrived here, but they brought with them this idea that we are opposed to this British monarchy, that we wanted to shed the monarchy, and that the United States would be founded on this idea of we the people. Well, we the people it didn't exist either, because we have a constitution that's actually based on English system of law, which a lot of people don't know that the founders of this country said the British monarchy was we all know it was the greatest form of law on earth. And how can we replicate it here without using the word king? And so the Constitution that we have was never intended to be a liberty and justice document. It was always intended to be a property and wealth governing document, and that has been that's how we end up here. But the idea of separating that settlers came of separating ourselves not only from in order to enslave other people, in order to enslave nature, we had to create this idea of this. It's the story of separation. The idea that we are not only separate, we as humans are not only separate from nature, but we are the owners of nature. And we are, at one time also the owners of other people. And that goes back as far as the idea of empire. So, you can, go back to the papal bull where, the Pope basically divided up the country and said, Spain, this belongs to you. Other countries, these areas belong to you, and we're just going to divide up the world. So the settler mentality has always been that what we see belongs to us. And our system of law reinforces that value system. And that's what has to change.
Wow, thank you so much for that context, Shannon. Because I know that when we hear concepts and ideas like the rights of nature, for many folks, it's still embedded in the legal framework that has been established through the English law and other legal systems that predate the laws that Indigenous people lived by here. So to hear from that perspective, I'd like to ask Casey, if you could, how would you interpret the rights of nature, and what were the laws that govern Indigenous peoples here prior to colonization?
First, I think one has to consider what do you mean by Indigenous people's law? And also, Rodney, I want to acknowledge you and say thank you for doing the interpretation that you're doing. It's so valuable. I also want to put a little plug in here for Indigenous knowledge, is that this particular sign language is based on the sign language that was used by the Indigenous people of the Americas to communicate, because there were hundreds of millions of us. And the majority of us had our own linguistic base. For instance, the Panka means the sacred head. We're one of five that are joined together as one. We separated because we were living on the earth in too big a fashion, and we're using her, what we call sources of life, not resources. So you have to readjust some thought right there. We were using the sources of life in an unhealthy manner. But we're also part of a larger linguistic group called, according to the Europeans, Siouan, S-I-O-U-X, which brings me to a lot of corny jokes, because like Custer got sued comes to mind right away. I'm sorry. Try to stay off of those. But it's interesting to have, when I was very young, people would say, can you talk Indian? Would you talk Indian for me? And first of all, we're not Indian. We're very individual groups of people with our own social mores, our own language, our own religion, and our own territorial base. And all of those were gifts from the Great Mystery. They were not assigned to us with lines around them. We had no borders, again, from the Arctic Circle to the tip of Chile. We lived communally within the territory that we were allowed to caretake. And in doing that, we assumed ourselves to be part of what is now called nature, rather than separate from. And so when we talk about recognizing the rights of nature, we talk about nowadays about being water protectors. Many times over, I've heard and understood and repeated the phrase that we're not here protecting nature. We are nature protecting itself. And so our laws, so to speak, our social norms were created from the space that we lived in, that you would teach your children, don't walk on the ice if you were in the northern country. And if you were in the southern country, you'd say, stay away from anacondas. So there were different ways that we would teach one another. And those laws were formed around how to live in harmony with all that is within the framework of where you were, and also how to protect that. And I will go back to being Ponca, because that's what I know. We 18 village sites that we rotated around, sometimes within months, sometimes it would be years. And those would be so that if the water was scarce in one area, or the buffalo were moving over here, or the corn wasn't growing in this place, or on and on that way, then we would move to the next village site with the idea that this would have time to replenish itself. So you might say that we lived within the natural laws, because there are a set of laws that are universal laws that are in place all around the Mother Earth, all around the winds that blow that we call Father Sky. The sun rises, it's daylight, it goes across the landscape, the skyscape, and it arrives over here. The moon, she does the same. She governs the rhythms. The stars have a pathway that can guide you. The grasses grow at a certain time of the year. The deer migrate along a different fashion than the mountain lion does. And humans at one time also lived their sacred path of being in relationship to all. So long story, but in a short version, there wasn't laws that humans made that were in violation of the laws of all of the other parts of creation.
Got it. Thank you for that. That brings me to Pablo, and I know that you live in a more urban setting, and I'm wondering, looking at your photography, you talk about a lot of these issues too, and how they've been present in the way you think about the indigenous people of the Amazon region. How do you say that these conflicts or systems have also made two oppositional forces difficult to sort of reconcile with each other? And I'm thinking of maybe mestizo or mixed heritage people in the city areas, and then also the indigenous.
I think I'm losing you.
Bryan got stuck.
Got the phrase right?
Break up or the question? Am I back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Sorry about that, Pablo. Yeah,
don't
Pablo, I
worry.
was just interested in how you might see these two ideas, and if that's something that plays out in your photography. If it's such you, you
You're breaking up, Bryan, pretty bad.
Yeah.
as well.
Do you want to type me the question? Okay, I think that one interesting thing that is also related to my story and how I started photographing and focusing on these issues is because the image that I had about indigenous people was completely wrong. I mean, was full of stereotypes and was really attached to the things that we used to see in museums, for example. Instead of having a more real image of how indigenous peoples are. So my entry point at these issues was exactly that like I was shown a photo essay that was shot like 20 years ago. And what I found out was that they were using the same clothes than we are using. They were using a watch, a bicycle, and I said, "Hey, how that's possible?" Because the image that I have about indigenous are people naked with no technology running on the rainforest, because that's what we've been taught so far. So I think that as an image producer, as a person who produces image all the time, I think I have a responsibility, and if image is really useful to build stereotypes and to criminalize, for example, too, I think it's also a great tool to break with those stereotypes and to teach and to share another narratives about these issues. Um, I think that all image producers have a responsibility on that side, and I think it's really interesting to see how these more hegemonic narratives are all spread all over the world, and that's something that is, for example, being used in countries like Brazil, or all over Latin America, actually, to call these people invaders of these lands, of their traditional lands, because they established some sort of pattern that they must be really equal to in order to be considered indigenous, and that's a really powerful way to discriminate these people, and in terms of how do they look like, and there's also people defending a concept of purity, and that's when they say, for example, are you a real indigenous, because
Wow.
they don't consider indigenous all those people that is studying in universities, or using technology or doing really great things. I think that today the battlefield to keep struggling is not only on the villages, but also in conquering, in going to step on other places, in our places, to make us to hear your voice. So
Ooh, I hope I'm back, but
yep,
thank you
you
for
are.
that, Pablo. I think that was really beautiful, and it is something that I can certainly relate to, and it brings me to Liana. I'd love to ask you, you know, based on what Pablo just shared with us, you know, have you ever felt like you were not Indigenous? Have you ever felt um, like the state or, society has tried to impose what that should look like on you? I know that, we've done together a lot of work with ethnic studies and cultural revival. Can you just share a little bit about what Pablo just said may resonate with you?
Well, I think, yeah, I definitely, get the idea behind the stereotypes, but coming from that other, what you said actually kind of struck a nerve, Bryan, as far as not feeling Indigenous. I mean, one, I'm from Texas, so we have a long history of trying to find our place. So, George Bush, the younger one, George W., uh, famously said there are no Indians here. And I doubt he said Native Americans. I'm pretty sure he said Indians. But yeah, that might be my own stereotype of what I think he's like. But he, and it comes down to it. I mean, when I started going to school here, my family is from Texas. I had no idea that I had Indigenous relatives. I had no idea. I mean, I knew I was Mexican, but it didn't dawn, on me the distinctions between that. So for me, when I was growing up, I grew up kind of in a more white neighborhood. And I knew I was Mexican, but I didn't really think about the consequences of what I felt like when I started learning that, other folks that were other Latinos started coming into the school district, and there were more and more Latinos there. But because I was there beforehand, maybe because I'm light skinned, I don't know, my attitude, I definitely wasn't Mexican enough. So I was never Mexican enough. And I kind of feel that way, like trying to find my own roots, the same thing with Indigenous. But I really think, honestly, that because of the way that our system is the way that it is, and the focus to assimilate, it is really hard to keep those traditions, and people die to keep those traditions. I mean, the Indigenous traditions now, in the teepee ceremonies, you can totally see how those Indigenous ceremonies were hidden in the Catholic um, ceremonies, just trying to keep that hidden from the folks that don't want you to be doing this. And so, it's a really hard thing for me. I started learning about my history, Texas Rangers, and all of these other things as I got older. I knew things were bad, but I was pretty sheltered. I didn't realize how bad they actually were. So when I started becoming conscious, is what I say, it was like, I want to say late in my 20s, late your early 30s even. It's when I started realizing, I used to be really ashamed because my folks didn't keep their culture. My folks didn't keep their language. What's wrong with my family? But I see the stuff that's happening right now at the border, and these 500 kids that no longer have parents they can't be matched up with. If I can fit in, if I'm light skinned and my kids are light skinned, you can bet I'm gonna try to fit them in and make sure that they stay with me. So there's just these things that you don't understand. And right now, one of my, I don't know, you call it stupidity or just stubbornness, but for me, I feel like when I started meeting folks that started coming over later after, Texas Rangers weren't that much of a thing anymore. We weren't getting hung the way that, that Black Americans were getting hung, and those kind of things that were being hidden. And we would get folks that come over from other countries, and they're worried about language. And because I don't accent my O, I'm illiterate. I can't, and I used to be really ashamed and be like, oh, I should do that. But, I don't feel that way anymore. For me, it's kind of it's a weird, I'm still growing, we all are, but I'm really in this really weird spot where no, don't accent my O. That's not my region. That's not who I am. I know, my assimilation. I know what has happened to me, and don't accent my O. It's really silly, I know, but it's always, and I feel like a lot of people have that. They just don't feel like they fit in. And that's what I'm doing now, is learning learning that culture, learning the things that are hidden in my own family's history. I really have to pay attention to that. So I kind of hope that helps. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, I mean, I kind of know you better than most, so, but I appreciate that so many of our friends have expressed this sentiment, and there's so much unlearning to do. And I think it's tied into, our conversation as it began with this juxtaposition of the rights of, colonizer and the rights of nature. So for anyone that would like to answer this next question, I'm wondering, how do we heal from these very, very imbalanced systems, be they legal, be they cultural, be they linguistic? How do we heal from them in a way that brings everyone in? Because everyone has their own experience, and there's no single answer. But what are some ways that each of you have tried to heal and make a welcoming space for folks for a path forward? And we can go in the same order. Yeah.
Bryan, I want to talk.
Okay.
I want to make that space for my girl here, for Liana. I really understand and want, if I could just hug you right now, I really would. Because that place that you come from is a place that everybody has been put in. This is the ultimate victimization that we cannot blame each other for. It's necessary for us to not have that lateral violence that's been taught to us. The prejudices that happen within the United States, I know, happen because they are driving a wedge between us. They are trying to victimize our children down on what they call a border, we call a medicine line, on the south as well as the north. And those children that are separated and taken from their parents are like the ones that my mother being kidnapped off to boarding school. That assimilation into the melting pot of the United States is a crime against you. And it makes me mad, and it makes me want to just go slap somebody around if they've ever said anything to you that made you feel other than or less than. You are other than, you're supposed to be. You're an individual that comes from that red quadrant that the colonizers, the Spaniards, totally twisted as bad as the colonizers in this portion of Mother Earth twisted us. So that when we went to school or when we watched TV and we watched the cowboy and Indian stories, many of our children wanted to identify with the cowboys because they won the battles according to the story that was told, that his story. But each one of us has those cellular memories that within you, you feel what it is that is correct. And that's what you have to cling to and understand. That is what is truth. Any of the his story that is given to you is purely made up stuff that Trump's family is probably very proud of, because it is their type of mind twisting of truth, instead of being able to recognize where we are within our own structure. But now you're telling your story, and it becomes her story. And it becomes the reality of what the next matriarch is going to be able to teach and understand, the ones that are listening to you right now. But we do not victim blame, and we do not believe in lateral violence. And that goes in every single direction, up and down, sideways, and all around. It's necessary for us to band together and to understand that those that are even making those so-called immigration laws are immigrants themselves. How dare they? How dare they? It ought to be made up of an entire board of Indigenous peoples where we could say, our Mother Earth has no lines on her face. You know, we don't recognize those at all. We flow like the waters, north and south, east and west. That's who we are. We're part of the natural laws. And I love you.
Yeah, I love you. Thank you for that. Yeah, it took me a really long time to not be mad at my family. It really did. And not be ashamed.
That's victim blaming that is taught by your oppressors.
Thank you for that. You're on mute, Bryan.
I think Shannon wanted to share some words. Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, really hard to follow that very personal sharing. Thank you, Liana, for sharing that. And thank you, Casey, for your offering on that. I think you were talking before about the system of laws that have been reinforcing this. I mean, law is about enforcing a particular worldview and making it real. That's what laws do. And the worldview that is being enforced by the main, our Constitution and on down in this country is not a worldview of kindness, acceptance, of love, of justice. It is a worldview of property ownership, and that includes, ownership of people and your history. You don't even get to own your own history. You are, the law says, well, you're in Texas, so that's who you are. So it's also about rewriting the stories of individual people, and so we're all coming to this reckoning. We're all trying to come to this healing. As a non-Indigenous person here, I'm trying to come to that place of healing, in from a very different place of privilege, and recognizing, that privilege that I've lived with like an invisible shield for my entire life that comes at the expense of everyone on this panel. And so when you come to recognize that, that's also part of this unraveling of this systemic injustice that we all need to, it's not about just saying like, oh, just move on, get over it, and let's start from here. No. I mean, we can't do that. But one of the things that, our organization Movement Rights and what we think is so powerful is that, laws first, if they're not holding up justice, then they need to be changed and they need to go. And human laws are fallible because humans are fallible. And if they're based on a completely colonized systemic worldview, we're going to get the laws that we have now. And those laws that separate, it's the story of separation. It's about separating humans from the rest of the living world. The law says nature is property to be owned for profit. And rights of nature, really, the word rights is a Western legal construct that is better understood by most Indigenous people as obligations to, or as responsibilities. But how do we shift the system from within itself? And rights of nature seeks to do that. How different would our actions be? How different would the world look if before we put down a paper and pulp mill or a fossil fuel project, if we ask the earth herself and the river and the communities of all living creatures, what is best for this ecosystem? And that's what really Rights of Nature intends to do. And it's no mistake that while this is gaining popularity around the world, there are 12 plus countries now that have recognized rights of nature. And in almost every case, it is because Indigenous people have pushed and understood this worldview that we are not separate from each other. We are not separate from the air that we breathe or the water that we drink. And our job at Movement Rights is to really realign human laws to reflect the real laws of the natural world. And how do we get there? So, the word rights itself, yeah, it's a Western legal construct, but this is about system change. This is about really shifting the entire system. And it's about shifting who colonized Western legal thinking, who we think we are as humans, that we are owners of the earth and of other people. Because in our legal system, you're either a rights holder or you're property. Women were property. I mean, that's how the world sees it. So that's part of what's exciting about the work of Rights of Nature. Is it sounds innocent, but it it really isn't. It really strikes at the heart of a lot of these things, and it's one solution of so many Indigenous-led solutions for change in the world.
Wow. It's subversive. So I asked y'all, how do we begin to heal? And y'all like just demonstrated it live and on camera and in front of us. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Casey and Liana, for sharing, and Shannon for that insight too. Pablo, I don't know if you had a response to that question, and if you could, since you have the mic, also, what is a call to action that you would like the audience to support and continue to be a part of the work that you're doing, or amplify support for the communities that you have been in contact with?
I think that to me, one of the biggest findings has to do with how we conceive the territory or the land or nature, as we are talking here. And I think that we are making a big mistake in thinking that we own this. I think nature owns us, or maybe we are part of this. And when it comes to traditional populations here in Latin America, the territory, the land, is much more than the parcel of land that is capable of producing profit or wealth. It's their mother. It's as they say, it's their rainforest, it's their supermarket, it's their pharmacies, and it has been providing them with everything that they need in order to survive for many, many, many years. But there's one interesting thing, and is that even when that rainforest has been completely chopped down and turned into, for example, soybean fields, it is still being sacred because because below their feet, there's hundreds of generations of ancestors that are still resting there. So I think that it's a collision of two different worldviews. One that puts ourselves as the owners of everything, and another one that is much more humble and that understands that the human is a tiny part of this. And I think that to me, the big message to all of you, to all the people that is looking at this, and the people that I'm trying to deliver my work, is that we don't need to understand them, but we have to respect them. It doesn't matter if we doesn't share the way they think or they see the world. We are different, okay, but at least we must respect another different perspectives, because that fact of respecting this, it's what it's going to stop in some way colonization through thinking, through the way we see and perceive the world. So I think that would be from my side. You are muted.
Do you have a call to action? Is there a place you'd like to direct people to continue to support your work?
Not exactly a call to action, but I think that it's much more like a message that I think it's really important, and it's about being respectful to other worldviews and those kind of things. But you can check my website or those kind of things if you want.
Thank you, Pablo. Casey? Call to action?
I think we're all called to action in various ways right now. I think that all of us realize that there's very physical ways we can participate. Now, I really love Eaton Workshop. I've been their guest a few times last year, being part of their a direct action that was going on, and they took care of my granddaughter and I while we were there. And we were able to participate in their film festival. And, my grandson, Sebi, is part of that, as well as many others. So that kind of action is powerful. It shows up at the belly of the beast there in Washington, D.C., so that the action that the rest of us want to participate in when we're able to take to the streets again, they're already involved in. That's big. Supporting movement rights at a time like this is very important to me. And it means that we can continue to do the kind of awareness building that we need to do. Now, around the statute here that's in Poncaland, the Rights of Nature statute, is something that is happening all around the world. Europe is looking at a Rights of Nature path forward, and several tribal nations as well as municipalities are. We want to do intertribal rights of nature forums. We're also, we have a petition that Eaton is helping us to push out a little bit about a very racist land grab that's happening here in Oklahoma called One Oklahoma. It's like the guys are still wearing the sheets over their head, only the sheets are invisible right now, except to those of us who know the emperor is wearing no clothes. And we know what the underlying ripoff is of sovereignty as it is, and the annihilation of the indigenous peoples. That is their ultimate goal. And they have a law that they're using in order to continue to rape the Mother Earth through the fossil fuel extraction and fracking that's happening here right now. So those are a few things. And as my grandson Sebi knows, there's also something that he and I are going to be working on, I hope, soon, to create another youth camp. It should be expanded, maybe, where instead of elders like myself, Sharon Day, the water walker, Arvel Licking Horse, and his incredible companion, Paula Hornum, coming on as advisors, then people like Sebi will be the new advisors for the youth. And that youth camp takes place at Good Medicine Camp. And I'm sure that we can talk to Sebi a little bit further down the road. But the call of action is, do humans want to stay part of the sacred cycle of life and be present as a species on Earth? If so, warrior up. Put on your big boy pants. Get out there and do what you have to do in order to stop climate change. change the system where you are, from your very home, from your very heart, from your very spirit, and expand that into the community around you, and expand that community into the community of humans, so that humans don't go extinct. We are at that point. We have to prepare a way for the 7 generations to come. We have to make relationships with the sacred water and say thank you every day. We have to move in a just transition into renewable energies. We have to call out the banks, the insurance companies. We have to do everything that we can do every day, all day. Then we can be kicking back in the next lifetime.
Woo! I mean, I almost feel bad, going to anyone else, but I wanted to make sure we didn't run out of time. So I asked you to go, Casey. I know Shannon had a quick call to action, and then we'll ask Liana.
Really quickly, just to say that we're so grateful to Eaton Workshop for this opportunity and for allowing funds raised through this festival to flow through movement rights, which will directly support the work that Casey is talking about. Casey led her tribe to be the first tribe in North America to recognize rights of nature. And now 5 other tribes and many, many others are moving that forward. It's going to be part of the work to stop the KXL expansion, and the petition that is also up on the Eaton site for this festival is Casey's petition to Congress. I think there's about 16,000 signatures. We're looking for a lot more than that. So I'm hoping that everybody will sign that petition to Congress to stop the takeover of tribal sovereignty in Oklahoma, which is a blueprint for the rest of for the rest of the tribes. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity and inviting all of you to take action.
Thank you, Shannon. Liana, do you have a call to action?
I think the calls to action, I would resonate with me. The only other one I could say right now is we have a mobile storytelling car that we purchased to be able to disseminate information, also to take PPE to places that need it. I'm very excited. It needs a little bit of work. I believe we have a GoFundMe out there. And I think that's on the Eaton page as well. So I think you might be able to find some really good ways to support on that page.
Awesome. Yeah. Help us stay busy. Follow Casey's lead. We'll have plenty of time to rest in our next life, in our transition in the next world. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Eaton, again, the whole team, everyone. The logistics of a live show are incredibly difficult, exciting, and fun. So thank you for joining us. And if there were any hiccups, they were all my fault.
You're the high-tech Aztec.
Yeah. And I believe that's it. Yeah. Good night to you all. And thank you for sharing space with us.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Wiblaho. You were on mute, Casey. Nope.
Still on.
Thank y'all.